Hello everybody, this is Custom MTG here today with another Magic the Gathering video. In today's video, I'm going to be going over a bunch of custom Magic cards created by, well, Magic players. These were all found on the Reddit r/custom magic. There will be a link to that in the description down below, but basically what I do is I take a look at all of the cards, I give you my thoughts, tell you what I think could improve, and maybe if the card is a little bit problematic, or my thoughts on how powerful it would actually be. It's kind of like spoiler season, but the cards aren't actually coming out, so it's really fun because a lot of people have some really creative ideas. Obviously some are a little more serious, some of them are just a little bit of fun, so why don't we jump right into this? Another thing to note, in the upper left hand corner you'll be able to see the user on Reddit who created these cards. For this video, I created none of them, so if you guys really like them, check out that user. They probably have a bunch of other ones as well. So why don't we start this off? First we have Oru the Beyonder. It's a 6-cost blue and red legendary creature, Elder Leviathan 6/6, and it has Commander Suspend 4. And you can pay blue and a red to activate that. And the rules text for Commander Suspend is, rather than cast this card from your hand or the command zone, pay blue and a red and exile it with 4 time counters on it. At the beginning of your upkeep, remove a time counter. When the last is removed, cast it without paying its mana cost. It has haste. So it's very much like Suspend, and except you can do it from the command zone. And what's interesting is I believe this is an ability, so the second part is not affected by commander tax, because it's not saying, pay, an alternate cost. It's the ability is pay that and then exile it. So that means you're always going to be able to pay 2. The thing is that you might sometimes want to cast it manually because you don't want to wait 4 turns. So that is definitely interesting. Also, suspending it doesn't add the amount of times you cast it from the command zone. So that's pretty cool. And then he says, whenever you cast another spell from exile, if Oru's on the battlefield or suspended, create a 1/1 blue tactical creature token. So this is very similar to Eminence, where the ability happens even when it's not on the battlefield. So let's say turn 1, you just play a mountain. Turn 2, island. Suspend this. Then the next turn, maybe you suspend something or somehow cast something from exile, like Squee the Immortal, who can just be cast from exile. You get to create a blue tentacle creature token. And the idea here is that you eventually end up just paying 2 mana for a 6/6 that also does other things. So this is going to be a deck that really cares about suspending things, and you might actually wait a little bit. You might suspend a couple things first. So maybe turn 1, you suspend something. Turn 2, or maybe you wait for it to suspend this guy first. So there's really any combination of things you can do, but this clearly wants to go in a suspend deck or a cast things from exile kind of food chain deck. I also appreciate the fact that Commander Suspend can still be done from your hand. So I think this card is wonderfully designed. I don't think it's too powerful. It may have been nice to see it in a 3rd color, but I think if you were to pick a 2-color combination, this is the one. Next, we have Wuzai, Master of Nothing. It's a 1-cost black legendary creature, human monk, 2/2, so it's a 2/2 for 1, and when it enters the battlefield, discard your hand. And that says, if you would draw a card, mill a card instead. So this clearly wants to go, this is a very particular card. Unlike, the one we just talked about is a little bit particular, but this one, you really need to be in the right deck. You cannot throw this into some random black deck. This wants to be in a deck that's reanimating things. Muldrotha deck may like this, but it mostly looks like a bad thing. Unless you really, really care about your graveyard, or, yeah. That's pretty much it. So you want to throw this in a deck that cares about their graveyard, and this video is, by the way, all commanders. Normally I do a mix of half commanders, half not commanders, but this video is all about commanders, but I think this one is more likely to be seen in a deck rather than at the helm of one, because I really don't see that big of a payoff other than maybe giving this to your opponent. I don't know, maybe you'd have to be able to switch it on the stack to avoid the ETB. I don't know. It would be interesting to see. Yeah. So, yeah, this is kind of weird card, but I think it would have some use somewhere. Next, we have Zurin, the Thousandth. It's a 4-cost black and green legendary creature, Vampire Hydra, 3/3. So you don't get to pay X for this Hydra, but it has lifelink and trample, and when it enters the battlefield, move all counters from all permanents onto it. Now, this, I think, would be a really awesome commander for a couple reasons. First off, I just like having lifelink It's just really nice. But obviously that second ability. Now this could just be, get a bunch of counters on a bunch of things, move them to zurin, which by the way is the definition of putting all your eggs in one basket. But this also moves permanents from your opponent's stuff. So at its base, this could be a 4-cost kill all planeswalkers, because you're moving all loyalty counters from all planeswalkers onto it. So it is a planeswalker board wipe. It will get rid of any counters, so if someone has charge counters on something, if they have +1/+1, if they have -1/-1, so you'd have to be able to put this in the right deck, but maybe something, there are cards that care about, that start with high number of counters and tick down, so maybe you do, the thing that summons the 2020, I can't think of it, why can't I think of it? The one that summons the 2020 indestructible token that's a land. It's when it runs out of counters, do that. There's a bunch of really cool cards that care about when they run out of their last counters, and this synergizes really well with it. On top of that, it also does some cool things with sagas a little bit, because, maybe you're about to get to the third stage of a saga. Let's say it's the Eldest Reborn or something. You can then reset it back to phase 1 by moving all the lore counters. Now, obviously, this is a big risk. If you do this and you had a bunch of +1/+1 counters, and then you move it on to zurin, and then they just kill it, all those counters are now just gone, unless you have something like the Uzalith? Yeah. So I like the card. It's a little risky. It's not obviously going to be competitive or broken. It's just kind of cool. Also, because it has lifelink and trample, the counters work better on it than most other creatures. So, yeah, I like everything about this. Next, we have Hakrisis, Helpful Kingpin. It's a 3-cost blue and red legendary creature, Goblin Noble, and it says, instants and sorcery spells players cast have assist. So this is a universal effect. It's not just your instant and sorcery. So if your opponents cast a board wipe, you can help pay some mana. If you cast a board wipe, they can help pay some mana. Anyone can help each other pay mana, and I think that's a very interesting concept. And it says, whenever a player assists a spell, that player chooses one. They draw a card, then discard a card. They create a treasure token. I like this card in the fact that it creates this really interesting dynamic of, oh my gosh, she's about to win the game, I don't have any mana, but I have this counter spell. Can anyone else help me pay for it? The thing is, the one thing I kind of dislike about this is that whenever a player assists a spell, they could just pay 1 mana to draw a card and discard a card, or pay 1 mana to create a treasure token. That, I don't know the exact rules on assist. Can you say, no, I don't want you to assist? Because if you can't, then that's kind of weird in the fact that they're probably just going to pay 1 occasion, which is not bad. It's making all your spells cheaper, but I kind of wish the effects were slightly weaker, but it said for each mana a player paid, that player chooses one, and then they get 2 effects. Obviously, they would have to be much weaker effects, whether it be, at the beginning of their next turn, add that much colorless, and then, or add a colorless mana. That could be an interesting little, you get to kind of add your mana for later. But I think I like the way this is. There are a couple things I might change around just to make it a little bit more incentive for people to pay more mana. But again, I don't know the rules on assist, so you might be able to just say, no, I don't want you to assist, and I don't know, we'll have to see. Next, we have Celta the Impatient. It's a 2 green, blue, red legendary creature, human wizard 3/4. So this is a very interesting card. Ready? All creatures have haste, including your opponents. All permanents untap during each untap step, including your opponents. All spells cost 2 less to cast, including your opponents. Whenever a player casts a spell, it deals 3 damage to its controller, and tap, each player draws 5 cards. So the idea is, this game's been going on too long. Actually, I think this might make it longer, but things now have haste. Things are cheaper to play, so you can play your big things. You can give things haste, so your big things are gonna swing. You can always have your mana up on other people's turns, so people are always pretty much gonna tap out. And you're going to be constantly drawing cards, although that part's optional based on whoever controls Celta. But the more things your opponents are playing, the more damage they are taking. Now, I think this is an interesting card design. I think it could be abused fairly easily. If you have anything that prevents, combat, or not combat damage, if you have anything that prevents non-combat damage, this can be... it's kind of broken, but since it applies it to your opponents, it's not awful. I don't know, it's kind of weird. I don't know exactly where this would fit in. I don't know if it'd be too powerful. I think it would see play. especially for that all creatures have haste, including it, so it's kind of weird. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Next, we have Silas, the Overthinker, 3-cost blue legendary creature, human wizard, 1/4, and whenever an illusion enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay blue. If you do, draw a card, then discard a card. Whenever a nightmare enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay black. If you do, lose a life and draw a card. So, yeah, basically you want a illusion and nightmare deck. This is very tribal based, and yeah, I think it's a really fair card that's just adding some card draw to nightmares and illusions. Obviously, I think nightmares has the better ability in terms of just losing a life is a lot better. Losing life and gaining card advantage is a lot better than just, you know, not gaining any card advantage. Because, like, if you run out of cards, if you have 0 cards in hand, you will draw a card and then instantly discard it. Versus the nightmare one, you could pay a life and keep it. So, yeah, obviously the nightmares are better. I'd rather play this in a nightmare deck. And, by the way, this is Demir for the purposes of Commander. Next, we have Nakees, Sun Soul Reclaimer. It is a 4-cost, red and white, 1/4, legendary creature, dog cleric. And you can pay 3. One of it being red, one of it being white, tap, exile a target card from your graveyard. If that card is a permanent card with converted mana cost 3 or less, you may put it onto the battlefield. If you don't, add red equal to that card's converted mana cost. So this is an interesting way for Boros to ramp and also gain card advantage, because you're gaining card advantage from your graveyard, which is always cool. It's not your typical draw card, but it's very Sun Titan in effect. And then it also ramp you if you need it. So say you have a 11 cost in your graveyard, you can tap this to add a bunch of mana. Obviously, I think this is meant to be a commander, but I think this could go well in some other decks. On top of that, I think even though it has all this good stuff, it has card advantage, it has ramp, and it's Boros, I think it's still not that great. If a commander, all it does is have a tap ability, it's very hard, because if that tap ability is too good, well, then it's not going to survive back to your turn. But if it's not good enough, well, then it's not good enough, and that's the only thing it does. So I wish it had a little bit more, maybe give it a keyword, maybe give it a way to protect itself a little bit, because I don't know. Yeah, I think this could use a little bit of buffing. Maybe make its power toughness bigger, but maybe you don't want it to be a bigger threat. I don't know, maybe give it haste, and so that if you have 7 mana, you can activate it, and worst case scenario, it's a 1/4, so maybe that's what you do, you give it haste, but yeah, this is definitely interesting. Next, we have the 15. Now, this is one of the joke cards, or not a joke card, but one that's a reference. So it's a legend, so this is an adventure. So it has Assemble the Heroes for 1 green. It's a sorcery adventure. It says create a 1/1 green squirrel creature token. And then you can pay 5, 3 of it being green, and create a legendary creature squirrel, 1/1. And when it enters the battlefield, choose target creature. Each squirrel you control gains indestructible until end of turn and fights that creature. So the idea here is that Emrakul, the most powerful creature in all of Magic, can be taken down by 15 squirrels. And that's kind of the fun little ha idea of it. And so this is, create a bunch of squirrels, you throw this in a squirrel deck, maybe the lead of a squirrel deck, and then boom, kill something. Obviously, this wouldn't be a super great deck to build because your commander's big payoff for having all these squirrels is killing 1 creature. In black, you can do that for 1 mana. So yeah, I think it's a very fun card, and that's why I included it here. Next, we have a Rack Master Procrastinator. It's a white, blue, and a black for a legendary creature, Cat Advisor, 1/3, and whenever a player casts a spell from their hand, exile it with a sloth counter on it. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, they may cast all spells they own in exile with sloth counters on them without paying their mana cost. So, interesting. When Rack leaves the battlefield, each player may cast all spells they own in exile with sloth counters on them without paying their mana cost. So, basically, you're going to cast it, and it's going to wait a turn to come in. And I've talked about something very similar, even maybe this card, but I have new opinions on this effect. I think this would be an awful card. I mean, it'd be amazing for people who played it, but it would be awful to play against. I don't know why I didn't think about it, but this would be the ultimate stacks commander. Think about it. You're trying to slow down your opponent, and I mean, it does slow down you, but that's what stacks does. You're just like, now all your spells come in 1 turn later, and this is in the perfect color to do stacks, so I really dislike this, but that's just because I dislike stacks. Next we have, last we have Reselve, Hive, Unbound. It's a Wooburg, legendary planeswalker, reselve, 7 loyalty, and it says it can be your commander, but it also says all slivers you control have, when this permanent enters the battlefield, proliferate. Then, a 0, create a 1/1 colorless sliver token, and a -14. You get an emblem with, whenever a sliver you control dies, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. Alright, I think this card's insane now. You look at it, and it's like, okay, this could be a new sliver commander, but also, it has some other potential. It's not just whenever a sliver enters the battlefield, put a loyalty counter on each reselve creature. It includes all of the creatures, so I could see this fitting well into a 5-color planeswalker deck. Think about it. His 0, even if there are no other slivers in the deck, his 0 is put a +1 or put a loyalty counter on each planeswalker you control. Just at its base, that's what a 0 does. And then if you get the -14, I mean, that's not going to do anything in a non-sliver deck, but I also kind of have an issue with the sliver deck and the fact that it's making slivers enter the battlefield, which puts more loyalty counters on him. Now, he can't really do anything with that loyalty, so I guess it's fine, but I just feel like it's a little, I don't know, it's something about it just feels off. It feels like, oh, once you get your ultimate, like, he's one of those planeswalkers, I don't know if it's actually worth it to keep him around after the ultimate. Like, I mean, obviously if you can keep him, but he just isn't, like, once you get that ultimate off, you never need to cast your commander again, unless you're in a sliver deck, in which case, cool, more slivers, I don't know. I think it's a little too powerful, even just outside of a sliver deck. In a sliver deck, it's insane. It's like that 1/5 sliver, I always mix up their names, but that you can pay 2 to create a 1/1. Now this you can only do once per turn, but you don't have to pay mana for it, so a lot of craziness here. Either way, those are all of the cards. This has been really fun. I enjoyed looking at custom cards and thinking about how I would build it in Commander. I want to know your guys' thoughts on those cards in the comments down below. If you enjoyed, please hit that like button, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.